Starting our list right at number 10, we have It's All in Peter's Head. For more than 2 decades, the characters of Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy has put themselves through increasingly absurd situations. Whether it's epic chicken fights or the Peter Copter, the Griffins have gone through situations that would be completely absurd in real life. However, in the world of the show, they can get away with just everything and be fine in just the next episode. So why is that? A Reddit fan theory suggests the reason why they do this is because the world of Family Guy takes place inside of Peter Griffin's head. Let's begin with his kids. We all know the unattractive daughter Meg. Well, it's said that she's actually a beautiful and popular teenager with a slight drinking problem. Meanwhile, Chris is actually a mentally challenged brother. Well, in the show, it kind of depicts that already. Theory says that one day she got too drunk and decided to pick up Chris, but ended up in a fatal car accident killing them both. This would explain why Peter dislikes Meg so much, especially because her issues caused the death of her brother. His wife Lois was broken down from the death of the children and decided to take her own life while having Stewie in the womb. Yes, this theory is really dark, so I'm sorry kids. With the loss of the entire family, Peter loses his mind and creates this whole fantasy world inside of his own head. As for Stewie, well, Peter never got to meet Stewie, which is why he's portrayed as a smart and cunning baby, because this is a reflection of how Peter expected his son to be. Coming at number 9, we have an allusion to the Twin Towers. First of all, rest in peace to all of those affected. But did you know that Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane was due to catch a flight that was destined to hit the Twin Towers? And his reason being was that he was hungover and overslept. Because I didn't know this, and I swear a lot of celebrities claim they just missed this tragedy. But this one is a little bit deeper than that. It was such an important event that fans thought it was the direct inspiration for the film's plot of Stewie having a near-death experience. Do you remember the scene where Stewie would get crushed by a falling lifeguard seat? Well, the scene is peppered with snippets of dialogue that may or may not reference the falling towers. Such as Stewie saying, quote, "Well then, it seems like there's only one thing to do. I must ensure that I had never gotten a close call with that lifeguard tower in the first place." And he also was saying, quote, "Yes, I did it. I stopped the tower from falling." This line struck out to me a lot because the falling tower was mentioned throughout the entirety of the film. Stewie's main goal was to go back in time to stop this tragedy. This moment could be attributed to the way Seth feels about missing the flight that was due to crash into the Twin Towers. That mixed feeling of guilt and relief is one of those feelings that are very hard to deal with, which could have inspired this traumatic episode in the first place. At our number 8 spot, we have the CIA's responsible for all humanoid animals. Do you remember that large chicken that would almost come out of nowhere and just start a full-on MMA fight with Peter? Well, his name is Ernie the Giant Chicken. Damn, I remember those fights, and I swear they would last just the whole show and be super chaotic and whatever. Well, a theory proposed by Reddit user Dalia states that the CIA and the Family Guy and even the American Dad series has the ability to put human brains into any other animal or human. Klaus from the sister show American Dad and Brian Griffin from Family Guy are both great examples of this because they are both intelligent humanoids that could potentially pose problems for the CIA, such as Klaus potentially beating the USA in the Olympics for skiing and Brian being a hardcore liberal. Humanoids appear all over the universe. It could very well be a brain swapping program used to control the population. We know how sketchy the government is, and even more so in these TV shows. At our number 7 spot, we have the Multiverse. Just came back from a Marvel movie, and it seems like I can't escape the multiverse theory, even in my own favorite show. Family Guy is just one of those shows where anything can happen at any time. This theory suggests that when the show first got cancelled in 2002, only 3 years after its debut, the old universe was completely destroyed, which is why the show is much more different after its re-release. This means that everyone in the show before are gone, and the characters we see now are the people in a new universe. At our number 6 spot, we have Stewie manipulates time on a deeper level. We see Stewie zapping in and out of different time periods using his time machine. Casual thing for a baby, I might say. But have you noticed that Stewie always stays around the same age? It doesn't seem like he gets any bigger, nor does he look any different throughout the whole 20 years of the show. The other family members seem to age, but very slowly. For example, Meg started at 16 and now she's around 18. Lois turns 43 in that episode where she had a midlife crisis, And Brian started the series as 7 and just celebrated his 10th birthday this season. So back to Stewie. He makes himself young to avoid the responsibilities of being old. Do you remember that episode when Stewie went into the future only to see a depressing, sad version of himself? That's the type of reality Stewie wants to avoid. On another note, he could be doing it for Brian as well. Seeing Brian die for the first time traumatized him, and he openly admits that it's his best friend. So he could very well be doing it to prolong his time with Brian. Right in the hump of our list, we have Brian is the real writer of the show. In season 12, episode 9, named Peter Problems, we hear Brian saying, quote, "I have a job, I'm a writer, I'm working right now. See this? All of this? This is the raw material of a picture of life that I'm going to paint with words." This got fans thinking if Brian could be the writer of the show. We know that Seth MacFarlane writes the show in real life, and he uses his own voice to play Brian Griffin. He doesn't change it or anything. This could explain why Brian is often seen as the voice of reason, or is the one to dispute arguments and feuds between different characters. Most of the exclusive and deeper meaning Family Guy episodes are the ones with Stewie and Brian. And since Brian experienced these firsthand, it makes sense that these episodes are in more detail than any other. Number 4, we have Peter saved Lois's life. Reddit user Lemonade proposed a theory that Peter saved Lois from a life of depression and potentially worse. It's mentioned many times in the past that Lois was a drug addict in her days as a young adult. She has also shown bad tendencies such as being a kleptomaniac who is unable to resist the urge to steal. On top of that, her father is rich, but always seemed to be a little bit busy and would often neglect the young Lois. Being from a rich family meant that it was unlikely she faced the consequences for her actions. So picture this, a young rowdy girl with no discipline and an addiction to drugs. It almost seems like a recipe for disaster, all until Peter came along. Peter was mentally challenged at the time, so this gave a misdirected Lois an opportunity to take care of someone, which also slowed down her life in a good way. All the way at our number 3 spot, we have Family Guy's All a Cover-Up. Originally, everyone's lives in the show were amazing. Cleveland still had a wife, Joel had his son, and a loving marriage where his wife didn't cheat on him. Quagmire did the single life, and his family probably wasn't tragic at this point. Peter was dumb, but still managed to care for his family. Well, except for Meg. However, as the show progressed, everyone's lives took a turn for the worse. Peter and Lois will get into more frequent arguments, which led the two to be separated multiple times. Meanwhile, Cleveland lost his wife and his show, so when he came back, he gained a wife that still loves someone else. Quagmire started to hate on Brian aggressively, and he would often confess his love for his best friend's wife, Lois. Bonnie and Joe had a baby, but right after they would begin to hate one another. Even Brian died for a bit. At our number 2 spot, we have Joe Can Actually Walk. Joe is just known on the show as a character glued permanently to his wheelchair due to an accident in the past. Joe is often seen to act over the top emotionally, but is also used to insert awkward yet still funny humor, often regarding his disability. However, many fans believe that all of it is just a cover-up and he is actually able to walk. In many different episodes, Joe explains the origins of his disability, but each story is different from one another. In one backstory, Joe mentions that he got disabled due to fighting with the Grinch on a rooftop. In another backstory, he says that criminal Bobby Briggs is the one who shot him in the legs. Every story is different, and it just seems that he can't even get his story straight, which could potentially mean he's lying. Taking our number 1 spot, we have Stewie, Meg, and Chris are not Peter's kids. A fan theory suggests that Stewie, Meg, and Chris could not be Peter's children at all. Well, first of all, do we really think any one of them looks like Peter or Lois? In season 15, episode 20, named A House Full of Peters, it shows Peter donating his sperm to a sperm bank. The kids that shared the same sperm all pretty much look the same as Peter. So how could Stewie, Meg, and Chris not look like Peter at all? The theory states that back in the day, Lois had many affairs, and we could see that that isn't impossible, especially with her fishy past of adult filming and substance abuse.
If you have a fairy godparent, give me 5 minutes and a few wishes. Number 10, Poof's dad isn't Cosmo. So some friends of mine and I were recently talking about the Fairly Odd Parents when playing some old Nicktoon video games. Someone joked about Poof not being Cosmo's, but when we thought about it, the evidence is very clear that Poof is not Cosmo's. In Fairies, genetics shows through color. For example, Cosmo and Mama Cosma both are green, albeit Cosmo is a darker green than Mama Cosma. We also see that Wanda and her sister Blonda have the same pink eye color. Poof isn't green or pink though, he's a purplish bluish color. The same color as none other than Juandissimo. But we see Cosmo pregnant with Poof in the Fairy Baby special, so how isn't he Cosmo's? Well, Timmy wished Poof into existence, so I propose that because Cosmo was infertile, the wish created a fairy baby using both Wanda and Juandissimo's genes, and then transferred the embryo to Cosmo. Number 9, the Dinkelbergs represent Timmy's dad's ideal life. The Dinkelbergs are the Turner family's irritating, childless neighbors. Redditor KickASSETTER thinks the couple's name might give insight into what they represent. I believe that the Dinkelbergs are a play on the term dink, or double income, no kids. It's mentioned many times that they have no children, a lot of money, plenty of free time, and have had a relatively successful life while dad came up short, got a mediocre job, and had Timmy. He's not unhappy that he has Timmy, but still resents the Dinkelbergs for any of the reasons any parent might have towards couples who don't have children. Number 8, Timmy is playing pretend. The reality of Timmy's life is a bit bleak on close examination, hinted at by the line "doom and gloom up in his room" in the show's opening theme song. But an anonymous theory on Imgur reckons his life is even worse than we think. The Fairly Odd Parents is about a kid playing pretend with his fish. His grandparents perished in a car crash when he was younger. Since they were the only adults who have ever understood him, he finds comfort in imagining that they are there to watch over him since his parents obviously don't care. His babysitter slaps him around. Mr. Crocker has made inappropriate advances on young Timmy for years, hence the delusion that he is desperate to steal Timmy's fairies, which represent his innocence, joy, hope, and good wishes for the future. Number 7, the fairies are there to be useless. One thing that bothers me about TFO, and it probably bothers you too, is that Timmy Turner learns the same lesson every single week. This lesson is that you can't just wish your problems away. Every time you do, you end up creating more problems. And even in a world where you get everything you want, there are still rules, terms, and conditions that will hold you back. Which brings me to the true purpose of the Fairly Odd Parents. It's not simply to give us a show where we can laugh at the misfortunes of a 10-year-old boy who had the world at his fingertips. It's to show us that the fairy godparents aren't really there to just give Timmy whatever he wants. Instead, the whole point of giving Timmy fairy godparents is to teach him that he doesn't need them. In fact, the very first episode of the main show is about Timmy wishing that he was grown up instead of just, well, growing up the normal way. Number 6, Jorgen is using Timmy to keep Crocker mad. It's revealed in one episode that Crocker's craziness over fairies is what is powering the big wand in the fairy world. If Crocker became sane, it would lead to a power shortage. This may explain why Vicky is kept around despite her evilness. Jorgen uses magic to manipulate people's minds to let Vicky keep making Timmy miserable, so that Timmy can be given Wanda and Cosmo. Timmy having fairies is what makes Crocker freak out. It's all a big conspiracy to maintain the power supply. Number 5, Vicky is protected. Throughout the series, Vicky progresses from being strict like a normal babysitter to being a total sadist, harming kids and getting away with it. She gets away with it, it seems, because Timmy's parents don't believe him. However, there's one adult who knows how evil Vicky is. The one whose son was outright enslaved by Vicky in the first episode he appears in. That's right, Doug Dimmadome. He even acknowledges that he knows she's evil when Timmy's parents ask him. So why doesn't he report her for child endangerment? Being the Richard person in Dimsdale, he definitely has the money to influence politicians and law enforcement. Therefore, it is my theory that he's the one who's been protecting Vicky all of these years by influencing the authorities to not take her in. Number 4, Cosmo is smarter than he seems. Throughout the series, Wanda is characterized as the smart, sensible fairy godparent, while her husband, Cosmo, is a sweet simpleton. But perhaps it wasn't always this way. Channel Frederator's cartoon conspiracy might have an explanation for Cosmo's apparent ignorance. Since Wanda usually takes responsibility for all of their backfired plans, her partner manages to evade the burden merely by playing dumb. However, Cosmo appears to have become less intelligent over time. Cartoon conspiracy posits that he may be feigning stupidity to escape punishment for the chaos he and Wanda always cause. Number 3. The fairies don't exist. Wanda, Cosmo, and Timmy's parents are all voiced by the same actors. This fact leads Redditor future Dr. Herp to wonder if Timmy's two sets of guardians are more closely linked than they initially appear. When I found out that the actual voices of Cosmo and Wanda were his parents' voices, it led me to thinking that every episode is just Timmy's vivid imagination coming to life. Wanda and Cosmo are slightly different voiced alterations of what Timmy wishes his parents could be. Cosmo and Wanda always have his back and protect him from Vicky, the evil in his life. He asks Cosmo and Wanda's advice about girls, school, dealing with aggressive peers, terrible teachers like Mr. Crocker, and life's events. Everything normally he'd ask his parents about. This is Timmy's way of growing up. Number 2, there are 3 timelines. The Fairly OddParents ran for 16 years, and in that long period it offered more than one glimpse into Timmy Turner's future. 1. The original timeline where future Timmy is voiced by Alec Baldwin as shown in Channel Chasers, and has 2 kids with Tootie or Trixie, ambiguous. Number 2, the Grow Up Timmy Turner timeline where he's Drake Bell in his early 20s, still has Cosmo and Wanda along with Poof, and is dating Tootie while flying around the world granting others wishes. And number 3, the season 9 or 10 timeline, which adds the talking dog. That's most likely a serial slayer, and the other girl he shares his fairies with. Number 1, the fairies are substances. This theory from Channel Frederator's cartoon conspiracy show on YouTube puts a pill-themed spin on the whole it's all in your head idea. Perhaps fairy world and fairies themselves don't exist at all. Instead, Timmy Turner's moods are being altered by antidepressants personified by 2 little fairy helpers. The video goes on to characterize the rest of the show's fairies as different medications as well. According to host Emily Carson, the overly buff Jorgen von Strangle is a metaphor for enhancements, and Wandissimo Magnifico, Wanda's macho ex-boyfriend, is Viagra. As for Crocker, Timmy's conspiracy theorist teacher, he's actually a therapist trying to convince Timmy to give up his substance reliance. Number 10, smartwatches. There were numerous jokes about future technology in the season 6 episode Lisa's Wedding, but only one of them accurately predicted the technology of the future. Hugh converses with his watch briefly in the episode, foretelling the emergence of smartwatches over 2 decades before the first one would be released to the public. It's a short moment that didn't mean much back then, but it did highlight important technology that would later become standard, including digital timepieces and voice recognition. It's too bad Hugh's earlier attempts to propose to Lisa using technology didn't quite turn out the way he had anticipated. Number 9, Blinky. Some of the greatest Simpsons episodes would not exist without Blinky. The three-eyed fish is meant to be a humorous reminder of the terrible impact Burns' nuclear power station has on the community, which includes mutating flora and wildlife like Blinky, a practice that is largely accepted or disregarded by the locals. Blinky has a real-life counterpart though, it turns out. Sound familiar? More than 10 years ago, Argentinian fishermen discovered a three-eyed wolffish in a reservoir close to a nuclear power station. According to a ZME article, one of the fishermen described how they were shocked to see this rare specimen. The story makes no mention of Mr. Burns' rival though. Number 8, Michelangelo's David. When Springfield citizens demand the suppression of Michelangelo's David, Marge is forced to learn a difficult lesson about censorship. The iconic piece of art is brilliantly disguised with a pair of pants in an effort to appease the up-in-arms community that won't stand for nudity. A replica of the statue that was on exhibit in St. Petersburg back in 2016 caused controversy and led to a vote from residents who wanted it covered up or removed. And just last year, the mayor of Florence, Italy, invited the principal to visit the statue for herself after a Florida school decided that it was too graphic to expose to children, according to GBH. In my opinion, art is art, but whatever. Number 7, the merger of Fox and Walt Disney. When Homer first met Kim Basinger and Alec Baldwin in the 1998 episode When You Wish Upon a Star, he made the decision to work for them. Homer called 20th Century Fox officials and pitched an idea for a movie. The following scene in the program revealed that Walt Disney now owns 20th Century Fox. Since Walt Disney and 21st Century Fox announced their planned $71 billion merger in March 2019, the scene is now considered one of the iconic things The Simpsons foretold. In other words, this established the agreement's date as well as the films that would be exclusively available on Hulu, Disney Plus, or HBO Max. Number 6. Trump. The year 2000 marked the debut of the Bart to the Future episode, in which Bart Simpson predicted the future for himself and his sister. After Donald Trump's presidency, the United States was given the responsibility of restoring the economy, according to Lisa Simpson, the country's leader. In addition to Trump being elected president in 2016, one television scene appeared to be practically an exact duplicate of actual life. A group of people watched as Donald Trump descended an escalator in the same episode. This scene is now recognized as one of The Simpsons' prophecies that came true. In actuality, a gathering of supporters watched as President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump ascended the elevator. Number 5. FaceTime. In the 1995 television episode Lisa's Wedding, Lisa saw a fortune teller who foretold her future for the year 2010. Lisa planned to wed her college sweetheart in the future. She called her mother to tell her about the good news. The phone Lisa used had a rotary dial and a screen that displayed Marge's face in real time. Despite being created in 2003, Skype was largely utilized as a calling service on computers. The FaceTime program, which Apple claimed it had created for Apple customers in 2010, allowed users to see the person they were speaking to while on the phone by using the phone's camera. Number 4. The Matrix. This Simpson forecast in the 2004 episode The Ziff Who Came to Dinner. A Matrix Christmas is advertised on a movie poster that appeared behind Homer Simpson at the start of the episode. The picture showed Neo, who was portrayed by Keanu Reeves, wearing a holiday hat. While The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions were released in 2003, The Matrix was first released in 1999. The following The Matrix franchise dystopia movie wouldn't be out until 2021. On December 22, 2021, The Matrix Resurrection was made available in the US. Although Neo was prominently displayed on the poster, he was regrettably not donning a Christmas hat. The Simpsons' Marge in Chains episode debuted in 1993. The main character of the episode was Marge, voiced by Kavner, who was sentenced to prison after being accused of theft. After a cargo of goods arrived in Springfield, the Osaka flu spread across the remainder of the city. Before arriving in the United States, the Osaka flu was first discovered in another nation. Additionally, the episode's doctor advised bed rest for the patients because there wasn't a cure for a condition right away, much to how researchers were still experimenting with a COV virus vaccine. Number 2. Hornets. The Simpsons hinted at a second epidemic in the same episode, where they prophesized in the episode Marge in Chains a large group of individuals pleaded for a placebo to treat their ailments. The throng overturned the truck after someone in the audience pointed at one that could contain the placebos, releasing a swarm of K-bees. A kind of bee known as the Asian giant hornet was reported to have arrived in the United States about the same time as the COV outbreak. According to the New York Times, the Asian giant hornet is a menace to the bee population and has the power to wipe out an entire colony. Number 1. Tom Hanks supporting the US. Tom Hanks had a brief cameo appearance in the Simpsons movie from 2007. A father took his 2 kids to view the Grand Canyon during the commercial, but the parents' daughter was dissatisfied and asked for a new Grand Canyon. Hanks then enters the scene and declares that the US government lost its credibility, so it's borrowing some of mine. Hanks made an appearance in the commercial in 2022, 1 year after President Joe Biden took office, to express the American people's tenacity in the face of the COV economic troubles. The video highlighted the accomplishments of Biden's administration thus far while focusing on the American theme of rebuilding its economy.
Coming in at a number 10 spot, we have the chicken fight. Let's talk about this chicken that Peter seems to be having a Michael Bay-esque fighting scene every single time they encounter one another. This strange feud all began when the chicken gave Peter an expired coupon, and from there, it escalated into increasingly destructive fights that involved innocent bystanders, vehicles, and even buildings. Although it just appears as a normal fight scene, Reddit user Trevor J414 made claims that these fights represents depression as a whole. Sorry to bring it down, but this is the theory. Think about it. Depression can strike at any time without warning. It can lead to destructive behaviors and coping mechanisms, much like the chaos that ensues during Peter's battles with the chicken. And just when you think you've won the battle against depression and you're all happy, it can sneak up on you again, much like the way the chicken always seems to come back to life after each fight. You know what I'm talking about. Every single time it opens the eye, show up the scene. At our number 9 spot, we have In Peter's Mind. Ever wonder how the Griffin family manages to escape with so much without facing any consequences? Well, according to a theory created by a Reddit user B0308, it's all in Peter's head. This theory begins with Meg, who in this alternate reality was a popular and beautiful teenage girl who cared deeply for her younger brother Chris. I know, pretty crazy. But it is said that Chris in this universe suffers from a multitude of mental issues due to the lack of oxygen he had at birth. Then one night after heavy drinking, Meg crashed the car while driving her brother home. Unable to cope, Lois then took her own life while pregnant with their third child, who Peter named Stewie. Then this is when Peter descended into straight insanity and then created this world in his head where his family was still alive. Peter resents Meg for causing the deaths of everyone around him, which kind of explains his relationship with her.
Yeah, you're the new me!
Shut up, Meg.
Stewie's hyperintelligence is a creation of Peter's imagination, and his resentment towards Lois is reflected in Stewie's constant planning for her demise. Peter himself was a highly intelligent man, but in this world, he has turned himself into a complete idiot. The family dog Brian is therefore a representation of Peter's intelligent side. Cleveland, Quagmire, and Joe are real people in Peter's life, but their appearances in the show are representations of their visits to Peter in the mental hospital. Cleveland stops visiting Peter, leading to the creation of his own spin-off show. Number 8, not related. Now, there is a theory that has been brewing for some time regarding the Griffin family. Specifically, some fans have speculated that Peter may not be the biological father of his 3 children, Stewie, Meg, and Chris. And at first glance, you're probably thinking, this ain't a surprise. I mean, look at all his kids. They don't look like Peter at all, with the exception of Chris. And yeah, there's no denying that. It wasn't until an episode in season 15 that this theory gained serious momentum. In this episode, Peter donates some sperm, and the resulting offspring bears a striking resemblance to him. This begs the question, if Peter's biological children look so much like him, why don't Stewie and Meg share the same traits? Some fans have taken this as evidence that the 3 children are the product of Lois's many affairs over the years. And although this isn't confirmed, we all know Lois's past was pretty colorful, so this theory is definitely one that could be true. At our number 7 spot, we have Stewie manipulating time. Have you ever wondered why Stewie Griffin is still a 1-year-old infant after 20 years of the show? Cause whatever his anti-aging routine is, I need to get on that ASAP. Back to the theory, we all know he has a time machine that allows him to travel back and forth in time. It's said by Reddit user Infinity Scientist that Stewie uses this to keep his age the same while everyone around him is slowly growing up. And surprisingly, if you pay close attention, the characters do age, but very slowly. For instance, Meg started the series at 16 years old and is now 18, while Chris was 13 at the beginning of the show and is now 15. Lois turned 43 in an episode where she had a midlife crisis, and Peter claimed he was 58 a few seasons ago. Brian started the series at 7 and celebrated his 10th birthday in a recent season. So why does Stewie do this in the first place? Well, he could have chosen to do this because he's afraid of the responsibilities of adulthood, and this could be confirmed. Because in Stewie Griffin, The Untold Story, Stewie gets to meet his future version of himself. While Stewie does eventually prevent himself from having that near-death experience, it's possible he's still afraid of ending up as a pathetic nobody. To prove this theory even more, the opening of the episode Christmas Guy has Lois walking into the living room holding Stewie, telling the family that Stewie will be going to his first Christmas carnival. Stewie then says, quote, "Again?" Number 6, the multiverse. Just came back from a Marvel movie, and it seems that I can't escape the multiverse theory anywhere I go. So Family Guy is just one of those shows where anything can happen at any time. Like, imagine you're walking up to get groceries. Next thing you know, a humanoid chicken just starts fighting you to the death. That's kind of what I mean. This theory suggests that when the show first got cancelled in 2002, only 3 years after its debut, the old universe was completely destroyed, which is why the show is much more different after its re-release. And I'm not talking about all the new production and all that stuff. This means that everyone in the show before are gone, and the characters we see now are people in a new universe. The statistical reason for the show being cancelled is that it was getting low ratings against its time slot competitors, but it seems that they had more outside the box ideas following it. After the show came back, the plot lines were wackier than ever, including meeting Jesus and even searching for the world's funniest joke. Remember that episode? That was a good episode. In the hump of our list, we have Stewie's dilemma. Many fans of the show have debated whether Stewie actually has a crush on Brian. And if you know, you know. While some viewers believe that Stewie's affection for Brian is romantic in nature, others argue that it's simply a case of Stewie mistaking his feelings of paternal or platonic love for romantic love. According to this theory, Stewie's dysfunctional upbringing has left him with a skewed understanding of love and relationships. Like his sister Meg, who is often shown to develop sudden infatuations due to her lack of love and affection at home, Stewie may be confusing his feelings of closeness and admiration for Brian as romantic love. However, this theory suggests that Stewie's connection to Brian is more akin to that of an uncle or even a second father figure, rather than a romantic interest. Stewie is portrayed as being closer to Brian than to his own father Peter, and in later seasons, Peter and Lois are shown to be distant from their children. This could lead Stewie to seek out emotional connections with other family members such as Brian. But as I mentioned in the beginning, if you know, you know. Number 4, Meg is Stewie's mom. I know what you're thinking, this is just gross to think about, but Reddit user Nathan Jackson 1996 thinks otherwise. According to this theory, Meg got pregnant by an ex-boyfriend who then left town, leaving her to give birth to Stewie. To cover up the scandal, Lois and Brian helped Meg keep the truth a secret and pass Stewie off as their own. One of the reasons this theory is so intriguing is that whenever Lois is shown giving birth to Stewie, it's always from the point of view in cutaway scenes. We never see the actual birth happen, which could imply that the woman everyone thinks is Stewie's mother may not be the real one. In the episode Partial Terms of Endearment, Lois even jokes that Meg gave birth to Stewie, and Meg doesn't seem to be confused or react to the statement, which could suggest there's some truth to it. If Meg really is Stewie's mother, it would add a whole new layer of depth to the relationship, making their tender moments all the more heartwarming. For instance, in Peter's Lost Youth episode, when Meg apologized to Stewie for leaving him in timeout for too long and they hug, it would take on a whole new meaning if they were actually mother and son. Number 3, CIA creating humanoid animals. In Family Guy, we see that some animals have human-like brains, opposable thumbs, and the ability to stand on their hind legs. This is usually explained by some as the next step in evolution or even as an act of God. As well, many people believe that the CIA are capable of transplanting brains into animals, which would mean that all the talking animals we see in the show are just a result of some messed up CIA experiment. So the theory claims that the CIA uses the brains of human subjects that are close to passing away and then puts them into an animal fetus whose brain isn't completely developed just so that it can hold the person's memories. As a result, human animals are not a cause for concern and are treated like any other minority. Number 2, Lois leaving Peter. There's a theory circulating that claims that Lois could be leaving Peter, or should I say Peter. In various episodes, Lois has dropped hints about her unhappiness with Peter's over-the-top antics, and even Stewie in a season 11 episode mentioned that she, quote, emotionally moved on. To add more fuel to that fire, Lois's wealthy father Carter has a history of hating Peter and even goes as far as offering her money to divorce him. So we know that she would be financially secure if she actually did so. Number 1, interbreeding. According to some fans, Chris, Megan, Stewie could be the products of interbreeding. And I know, pretty gross. This is kinda why I left this at the end. It all comes down to a reveal made in season 4 where Peter tells the family about their family history. And we find out that Peter's great-great-grandfather, Nate, married Lois's great-grandmother. This means that Peter and Lois are blood relatives, and their children could be the result of interbreeding. Now before you get too freaked out, let's take a closer look at this theory. Some fans believe that since Peter and Lois are very distant relatives, and after so many generations, any potential genetic problems wouldn't be an issue for their children. Others disagree, saying that the appearance of Peter's biological father, the Irish Mickey McFinnigan, in season 5 proves that Peter is not related to Nate Griffin at all. Regardless of the truth of the matter, it's worth noting that the Griffin kids are known for their special personalities. Whether or not this is due to inbreeding is up for debate, but it certainly adds a very interesting layer to the show's characters.
Number 10, Chris the Future Criminal. In an episode of Family Guy, Chris performs a recreation of the infamous scene from The Silence of the Lambs where Buffalo Bill is dancing naked in front of the mirror with a scarf. For those unfamiliar with the movie, Buffalo Bill is a criminal who abducts women, locks them in a pit, and forces them to put lotion on their skin so that he can use it to create dresses. As disturbing as this may sound, it's not just a mere reference to the film. Interestingly, Seth Green, the voice actor for Chris, actually based his portrayal of the character on Buffalo Bill himself. So this connection between the two characters begs the question, how far will the writers go with this relationship? Could we potentially see a future episode where Chris has a basement filled with bodies? Would be pretty interesting. Number 9, Peter saved Lois's life. Reddit user Lieutenant Lemonade proposed a theory that Peter saved Lois from a life of depression and potentially worse. It's mentioned many times in the past episodes that Lois was a substance addict in her past days as a young adult. She also has shown bad tendencies such as being kleptomaniac, who is someone unable to resist the urge to steal. On top of that, her father was rich but always seemed too busy and would often neglect a young Lois. Being from a rich family meant that it was unlikely she faced the consequences for her actions. So picture this. A young, rowdy girl with no discipline and an addiction to substances. It almost seems like a recipe for disaster, all until Peter comes along. Peter was mentally challenged at the time, so this gave a misdirected Lois an opportunity to take care of someone, which also slowed down her life in a good way. She had to commit to caring for her husband and then to her children, which made her realize that she doesn't have the time to be doing all these rebellious things. So in a way, Peter saved her life without her even knowing it. Number 8. Stewie is a clone. According to a popular theory, Stewie is actually a clone of an evil genius. The identity of this mastermind is still unknown, but some speculate that it could be a German scientist from the 1940s, while others believe it might be someone from the future who sent their DNA back in time to create the perfect weapon for world domination. Stewie's impressive arsenal of gadgets and weapons are far beyond what any normal person would have access to. He possesses technology that is more advanced than any military in the world, allowing him to phase through dimensions and travel through time. Stewie has also shown himself to be a formidable foe, waging war against all his enemies. Although his character has been softened since the show originally aired, Stewie was once known for constantly plotting to end his mother's life. Nevertheless, there is no denying his super level intellect, which he has used to outsmart and outmaneuver his enemies time and time again. Is Stewie really a clone of an evil genius? Number 7. The chicken is the Grim Reaper. The infamous chicken fight scenes in Family Guy are some of the show's most iconic moments, with the feathered foe determined to take down Peter at any cost. But while we've seen the character of the Grim Reaper on the show, there are actually some fans who believe that the chicken actually represents him, rather than just being a mere rival for Peter. According to this theory, the chicken's relentless pursuit of Peter is actually a metaphor for the Reaper's unrelenting quest for souls. Despite numerous attempts to end Peter's life, the bumbling patriarch always manages to come out on top, much to the chicken's frustration. But what if the chicken's true goal is not to end Peter, but rather to claim his soul? If the chicken is actually the Grim Reaper in disguise, then his ultimate mission could be to capture Peter's soul, the one soul that has so far managed to elude him. And if he succeeds, it could mean the end of Quahog as we know it. Number 6. Joe can actually walk. Joe is just known on the show as the character glued permanent to his wheelchair due to an accident in the past. Joe is always seen to act over the top emotionally, and is also used to insert awkward and some people find it funny humor, often regarding his disability. However, many fans believe that all of this is just a cover-up and he's actually able to walk. In many different episodes, Joe explains the origin of his disability, but each story is different from one another. In one backstory, Joe mentions that he got disabled due to fighting with the Grinch on a rooftop. In another backstory, he says that criminal Bobby Briggs is the one who shot him in the legs. Every story is different, and it just seems that he can't keep his story straight, which could mean he's potentially lying. And just if you didn't believe us, here's another one of his moments where he miraculously walked. Number 5. Brian is the real writer of the show. In season 12 episode 9 named Peter Problems, we hear Brian say, quote, "I have a job. I'm a writer. I'm working now. See this? All of this? This is the raw material of a picture of life that I'm gonna paint with words." This got fans thinking if Brian could be the writer of the show. We know that Seth MacFarlane writes the show in real life, and he uses his own voice to play Brian Griffin. He doesn't change it or anything. This could explain why Brian is often seen as the voice of reason, or as the one to dispute arguments and feuds between different characters. Most of the exclusive and Depper Family Guy episodes are the ones with Stewie and Brian, and since Brian experienced these firsthand, it makes sense that these episodes are in more detail than any other. Number 4. The Twin Towers. First of all, rest in peace to all those affected by this disaster. But did you know that Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane was due to catch a flight that was destined to hit the Twin Towers, and his reason for skipping out is because he was hungover and overslept? Because I didn't know that. It was such an important event that fans thought it was the direct inspiration for the film's plot of Stewie having a near passing away experience. You remember the scene where Stewie would get crushed by a falling lifeguard seat? The scene is peppered with snippets of dialogue that may or may not reference the falling towers, such as Stewie saying saying, quote, "Well then, it seems there's only one thing to do. I must ensure that I never had the close call with that lifeguard tower in the first place. And yes, I did it. I stopped the tower from falling." This last line stuck out to me a lot because the falling tower was mentioned throughout the entirety of the episode. Number 3, Joe Swanson was the Tick. The Tick is an animated TV show that aired on Fox between 2001 and 2002, which starred Patrick Warburton, who also voices Joe Swanson in Family Guy. The two characters share many similarities, including a muscular frame, a big chin, a dramatic personality, and of course the same voice. Now, a Reddit user by the name of Mr. DS speculates that Joe may have become the Tick on the side because he wasn't doling out enough justice as a cop. The Tick's costume may even grant the wearer superhuman abilities, as he possesses super strength and never gets injured. Perhaps the costume even has the power to heal Joe's paralysis. Fans of the theory have pointed out that Joe's personality fits perfectly with that of the Tick, who is known for his quirky and upbeat attitude. Additionally, both characters have had their fair share of battles, with Joe frequently getting into dangerous situations as a police officer and the Tick fighting supervillains on his show. Number 2, same dinner. Have you ever noticed that the Griffin family in Family Guy eats the same exact dinner every night? Mashed potatoes, roast beef, and a pile of peas seem to be their go-to meal. It's no wonder that Peter Griffin can't seem to shed any pounds. But have you ever considered the reason behind this monotonous meal? Some fans speculate that the reason the Griffins eat the same thing every night is because they are prisoners. That's right, the entire show takes place in a basement on a set that someone has constructed. The family has been kidnapped to act out a sitcom in someone's home. But why would the kidnapper choose to serve the same meal every night? Perhaps it's because he wants to maintain control over every aspect of the family's lives, even down to what they eat. Number 1, Stewie's dilemma. Many fans of the show have debated whether Stewie has a crush on Brian, and if you know, you know. While some viewers believe that Stewie's affection for Brian is romantic in nature, others argue that it's simply a case of Stewie mistaking his feelings of paternal or platonic love for romantic love. According to this theory, Stewie's dysfunctional upbringing has left him with a skewed understanding of love and relationships. Like his sister Meg, who is often shown to develop sudden infatuations due to her lack of love and affection at home, Stewie may be confusing his feelings of closeness and admiration for Brian as romantic love. However, this theory suggests that Stewie's connection to Brian is more akin to that of an uncle or second father figure rather than a romantic interest. And in later seasons, Peter and Lois are shown to be distant from their children. This could lead Stewie to seek out emotional connections with other family members, such as Brian. Those were top 10 dark Family Guy theories that will blow your mind. Make sure you like and subscribe, comment if we missed anything, and we hope you have a scary day.